I'm a little bit of an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't set out to found anything. I didn't set out because I had this big vision. I actually helped a company go from 7 figures to 10 million, to 30 million, to 100 million. And so I became an expert in the thing that other people were trying to figure out. And we grew this 7-figure business inside of the safe harbor of $100 million business, right? So I helped create a $100 million business, but we had tens of thousands of small business owners as our customers. Like, they were watching all this success and saying, you haven't just figured out how to help me with my sales and marketing. You figured out how to scale a business. And could you start teaching us that?
I was thinking about this today. You got a business called Elite Entrepreneurs.
Correct.
Let's start with this, man. What makes someone elite?
You know, that's awesome. Back when, you know how it is, you go to name your thing. You're like, what do we call this thing? Right. Yeah. And we had been sharing with business owners for years, 7-figure business owners specifically. We'd been sharing that it was, at the time, roughly only like 3 to 5% of businesses ever cracked that $1 million mark. Now, in the last few years, there's been a little bit of inflation, and there might be more 7-figure businesses that don't actually equal what it meant to be a 7-figure business 5 or 6 years ago or whatever, or 10 or 12 years ago when we started this. But still, it's relatively few. And so in honor of those people, and it wasn't that they were better than anybody else or anything like that, but they had done something that most hadn't. They've arrived, they've been somewhere that most hadn't. And so we just said, hey, you're breathing elite air. Like, this is different. And you run into new challenges here. So we'll celebrate what you've done, and we'll acknowledge there's new stuff here. So anyway, we thought of them as being elite, not us. We were naming it after the people we serve.
I always a wise choice. So that is a really small percentage. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is of, let's say, the US of people that have businesses, and then 3 to 5% of those. It's a really small number.
Yeah.
In that space, though, do you feel like those pursuing business at the highest level, we'll say 7 and 8-figure plus is like the highest level, are like share the same kind of mentality? Is there something mentally that they possess, even if their skills are varied, even if their circumstances are varied? Mm-hmm. Is there something special they have that makes them elite mentally?
Yeah, another good question, Aaron. I think any viable product or service that has enough of a market opportunity can get to that $1 million mark, right? So in that way, I don't think it's special. However, what I think is special about it is that even though there might be enough market opportunity and there's a viable product or solution or service there, right? Apparently, it's still hard enough that most people don't get there. And I think the grit and tenacity, the, kind of willingness to take that road rash on your face and just keep doing it. There's a perseverance, a tenacity, a grit, a figure it out kind of thing that is unique. Most people don't have the emotional fortitude to just keep going at it. So yeah, I think that makes them a little different.
It's cool you say that. I recorded a podcast earlier today from a woman that wrote a book on grit. Her name is Laura Jones. And it was really cool to break down grit, but I can appreciate grit's placement in this. I love perseverance. This one is new, though. I've not heard the use of the phrase like emotional fortitude. And I want to dig here a little bit, because I think as business has evolved for me and my experience has changed, I coach a lot of guys at 7 and 8 figures also. There is like you do have to be willing to be punched in the face. You do have to be willing to carry an immense amount of responsibility. You have to be willing to be optimistic when things aren't looking good and push through hard times. When you say emotional fortitude, you're meeting someone who has already walked through a lot to get to the place where they can work with you guys. Mm-hmm. But what was your journey of emotional fortitude? Like, how did you get to a place where you could take the knocks and keep on ticking?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I've reflected on something like this question many times. And the reason why is that I hold entrepreneurship at such a level of like reverence and respect that I don't know, still to this day I wonder if I actually have that same thing in me that I see in the people that I help. And here's why. I'm a little bit of an accidental entrepreneur because I didn't set out to found anything. I didn't set out because I had this big vision. I actually helped a company go from seven figures to 10 million to 30 million to 100 million. And in that process, we learned by doing the real practical things that we had to do to keep shifting through those stages of growth. And and so I became an expert in the thing that other people were trying to figure out. And and we grew this seven-figure business inside of the safe harbor of $100 million business, right? So I helped create $100 million business, but we had tens of thousands of small business owners as our customers. They were using our software product, watching us grow. They were seeing us win Best Place to Work awards. Like they were watching all this success and saying, "You guys have you haven't just figured out how to help me with my sales and marketing. You figured out how to scale a business, and could you start teaching us that?" And so we started teaching it. And and so all of a sudden we had a seven-figure business, teaching coaching business inside of $100 million software company. Well, a $1.5 million coaching business inside of $100 million software company is nothing, right? It's a little drop. And the $100 million software company was not going to do this anymore. They're like, we shouldn't do these little things spin up over time. It's not like it was a full on distraction, but it wasn't core to what we were doing. And I was part of the decision to say, yeah, we probably shouldn't be doing this anymore. It's not us. And so that piece was going to go away. Well, I helped create it. It was one of my things that I helped to build and create. And so we agreed on some terms. I bought it and we spun it out. So yes, I helped to grow it inside of that company. So I did grow that, but I didn't have to really do all the normal grit and grind things that we just talked about that I revere in other entrepreneurs. I didn't do that same path. So I don't know. That was a long answer, but that's what happened. And now, as soon as I felt the weight of it, and the reason I talk about that emotional fortitude, the day that I signed that now I own this, I physically felt different. I felt that. I was like, whoa, because before it was propped up, under somebody else's thing. And then all of a sudden it was mine. If I felt different, and every day I would check the bank accounts, like, what's going on there? And that mental, emotional taxing, like, is this thing going to live? Is it like, am I going to make it fall apart? Anyway, for the first few years, maybe I earned a little bit of that entrepreneurial thing, but I wouldn't have done this if it hadn't happened in the way that it did.
Yeah, I get that, man. I think that taxation, the way you use the word taxation was really good, is so unique. I remember I submitted like a 6-month notice to my boss, mm-hmm. and all the way up until quitting, there was always a safety net, right? I could always take it back or what have you. And circumstantially, nothing changed the day after I quit, but everything looked different. Everything had changed. It was just this strange, I don't know, like twilight. I remember my first week, I partied real hard. Like it was like, yeah, like I'm doing it. I'm going for it. And then like the second week, I just freaked out for a full 7 days. So I get the tax, and man, I like stayed I was still in the same apartment for a little while, and I really got scared and terrified of that responsibility. It was not only, it was like bigger than me. And I get the sense this is true for you and the team you have too. It's, if you're serving other people, the deficit of the business also deficits the people that you want to help. Like it's all kind of intermingled.
Yeah. Totally. And yeah, at first the identity of the business and your identity is so intertwined. And then you layer on top of that the impact, the interdependence, I guess. Impact's a better word for the people you're serving. And when I bought this business and spun it out, there was a book of business. There was a client group there that we were supporting, which was part of the motivation for the company to sell it to me. They didn't want to just drop this program when there were lots of people benefiting. So I had a bit of a safety net in that I didn't have to worry right away, but my big worry was how long before they realized this is different now, right? I didn't think it was really different, but if they were attaching because of the relationship to the bigger company, at what point would they start peeling off? And they did. I mean, the first year we dropped from 1.5 million down to 900,000. Like we lost that much business that first year. At the same time, we're like, oh, we don't even have a website for this because it was just another service line, a product line, right? And it was like, oh, there were some things that we had to do startup mode, but we were like a well-funded startup with clients, and we're just doing everything we could to hang on to enough of them. So, we slid that first year. The next year, we slid down further to 720. The year after that was COVID, and I was like, and I thought we were just going to drop off, and we lost about 30% of our business that March, April of 2020. By June, and it forced us to pivot. So I did earn a little bit of entrepreneurial stripes here. It forced us to pivot, and we did. And by the end of the year, we had as many customers as we had since we spun out. And so we stayed flat that year. The next year, we got back to 7 figures, which it was a big deal to me. I'm like, now I'm elite too,
Yes, I did it. Yes,
I did it. Yeah. So we sort of right sized to where we really were over those first few years. We're not a $1.5 million business. We're really like the $720,000 business that would have gone further south if we hadn't pivoted and figured out how to do this in a new way.
nice.
And thankfully we did. We were forced to figure it out. But now that I have a 7-figure business of my own and we're working on doing the things that we teach to go to 8 figures, that feels good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think emotionally changes for someone that crosses to 7 and wants to go to 8? Because there is a different emotional calibration there too.
Yeah, well, I think there's a little bit of I don't know how long this lasts. Maybe it's different for every one of those 7-figure business owners. They join the elite club, so to speak, and there's probably a little bit of feeling of validation, or up until then, they have family members and friends saying, "Why did you quit your job, Aaron? Why did you do that? You had a good job. What were you thinking? Right? Are you sure this is a good idea?" And even if they're supportive, there's still enough like doubt and surprise in their minds if you're actually, like it's happening, and they don't have to feel ashamed if they're the mother-in-law anymore. They don't have to feel ashamed that you're doing this weird thing. And so, I feel like they arrive and go, okay, like it's legit. Like I've created something. But then they start to bump up into almost new physical realities. Like there's a next set of walls that they start hitting. Like, wait a minute, there's something else here that I don't know yet. Like I still have to figure some new things out. And so there's a little bit of celebration, validation, accomplishment. And then there's still this, oh, but I've never been the business owner of a 7-figure business. I don't know what to do from here. So it's more unknown.
Yeah, it feels to me like the emotion that I have hearing you say that is almost like you get to this cool hike and you summit and you're like, yeah, I did it. Woohoo. Yeah. And then you look over and it's like just like a resting spot. You're like, shit, I got a whole other, damn it. And like, okay, part of me is really excited about that, right? The next summit, the next climb, like I think that's really important. But also entrepreneurs are like the worst. We are the worst at moving the goalposts and not enjoying what we worked so hard to create. Like, are you seeing that too? Like, is that
Agreed.
resonating in your world?
Yes. Like their drivers, often goal oriented drivers, like you said, moving the goalposts. Okay, we got here, but it's almost like that wasn't enough. And we got to go do this and we got to do that. And if we're not careful, and maybe this is kind of what you're leaning into a little bit here, but if we're not careful, we can do a number on the people who are along for the ride. But this is like, wait a minute, but all we do is talk about what's wrong or what's next. We never stop and say, wow, look what we accomplished. Or maybe we stop at that resting place on the summit and go, look at the beautiful views. Look at that hike that we did that. And they're more inclined to look at the next thing and go, wow, I got a lot to do. Let's get going. And sometimes they forget the refueling benefit for them and the team to stop and acknowledge what was accomplished and actually use that as fuel for belief that we can go do more. Like, look what we've done. Let's use that as fuel to believe that we can go do more.
Man, I want to dig here a little bit because I do think this is a discussion that does not happen often enough. With we'll use your language, elite entrepreneurs. The pattern that I see the most is I'm going to grind until I get there. But there is nebulous, like the idea of there has no definition.
Yeah.
It keeps on moving. And even historically, you could look back and see evidence that they got there and then they went to the next there and the next there and the next there and the next there. And that sequence to me, it just reeks, because I know this so well from my own internal workings. It reeks of I'm not enough until I blank. And that script is always rewriting. But I find that like almost every entrepreneur that has this dying, burning flame inside them is also equally burning internally with this, like, I've got to prove myself to something or someone. And that has a big consequence. Like I think that there are some awesome elements and some gratitudes that are due to that. Over the long term, though, I think it's a very unhealthy pattern. So when you're supporting these entrepreneurs that do want to scale, how do you also help them like start to integrate health and start to integrate their lifestyle and start to make like their world better and spend time with kids? And like, that's the point. That's why we did it in the first place. So how do you remind them of that?
Yeah. I love that you used the term, you talked about a flame, they kind of have this fire burning in them. I find that it's the object of that fire is the difference. If the object of the fire is around this I'm not enough notion or more internally driven, that's problematic. If they're just grinding around I'm not enough, that's a path to burnout. It's a path to your relationships getting all messed up, your health getting messed up, maybe your personal finances, going to pot, whatever. Like, it is a disaster if the orientation or the center of that flame is about I'm not enough or some, I don't know, transactional outcome, I'll call it. If you can take that fire, if you can spark a flame or fire around purpose or cause or something bigger than themselves, and you can do it in a way that brings together the team in a powerful way, especially if they get to co-create the articulation of that purpose, then it's something more than them. And you're starting to do that. It's almost like separating Siamese twins. We talked earlier about the how integrated the business and the business owner is early on in the life of that business. And as it grows, there needs to be a separation where it's like you and the business are not the same. And if your drive and your grind is all around your personal purposes, like, I don't know, wealth, status, personal identity kind of stuff, I'm not enough pursuits, then not going to work. Especially if it involves bringing a lot of people along for the ride. But if you can go to like, here's our higher purpose. Like, our purpose is to realize potential. And it doesn't have to matter a lick if you like our purpose or our clients like our purpose. But that's the flame that our team, those are the words that our team uses to describe the flame that we're about. and almost like an Olympic torch, we run around with we pass this flame around, and like we celebrate the flame. This is the cause, it's the meaning, it's the impact. And it's not about me or my insecurities or about being enough or not as a business owner. It's about this cause. And my team rallies around it, and we go create plans, and and you never summit around that cause, right? It's an always thing. Jim Collins talks about it as a guiding star. Like you don't achieve that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going on and on because I get excited about this, but hopefully that was useful in some way.
Oh, well, no, yes, incredibly useful. And the reason I said no is don't stop here. Like this is really meaningful. Dan Sullivan calls it the horizon. I think that, the idea of an ideal is incredibly important for striving, for growing, for pursuing. And also there has to be like this, a very delicate, hard to find line where we do both. And the rhetoric that I found myself falling prey to was sort of this like hustle porn nonsense where no pain, no gain, and like 8 days a week, baby, never sleep, just work. And like that,
energy drinks sponsored by Monster, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like to me, it's almost like the corporate filter in entrepreneurship. Like we corporatized entrepreneurship by making it like, well, you need all these supplements to get to be the best entrepreneur. And in a way that bastardized my work, it also bastardized my rest because I wasn't resting. I wasn't taking care of relationships. I wasn't leaning in. I was spin cycling for a very long time and lost in like, why don't I? Why can't I? How come I don't have this? How come I don't have that? And I think my challenge to entrepreneurs now is understanding that in a scope of time, there are certain things that you can certainly revisit. And there are other things that you can't ever revisit. Some of which is contextualized because I have a kid. But I think the other part is like, I remember one summer I was promoting travel hacking. So I used to teach people how to use credit to travel the world for free. And from May 15th until September 15th, I was in a different city every weekend. And I loved that. It got me so much attention. It built like a bunch of sales. People were all about like this travel lifestyle. It helped me build a business. It helped me grow. It helped me see the world. I got to see new cultures. I got to meet new people, sit in bars and like converse with locals. Like it was beautiful. And also by the time I got home, my friends didn't call me anymore. And that's just a double-edged sword that you kind of ride when you're in this space. But I do think it's important to have this balance, like maybe balance not by the traditional term of like it's equal on both sides. But I do think there's a role of being holistic. I use the word harmony. I love
harmony. Harmony.
Might be totally different ends of the piano, might be wildly far apart, but the keys all kind of make sense together and sound aligned. How do you help entrepreneurs? Like what inside of your program, maybe just in your mind, like how do you help entrepreneurs find their like, hey, be present in these things because they matter. And also let's help you grow.
Yeah. The pandemic, you could look at the pandemic and say that's, one of the worst things that's ever happened in the last, X number of years, however long. But there were some good things that happened as a result of that struggle that we had collectively. And one of the good things that happened is that I think the idea of taking care of ourselves so that we could be great for others got a lot more airtime because of the pandemic. After, there's a lot of isolating. I think there's a lot of social, emotional fallout that happened because of the pandemic. And I don't need to get too much into that, but here's what I'm trying to say. The business owners we worked with became way more open to the idea that I need to be well. My vessel needs to be really healthy in order for me to pour out to others the way that I want to as a leader. And the pandemic sort of accelerated our collective acceptance of that idea that I've got to be good as a leader, not just in my execution as a leader, but in my well-being. I got to be whole so that I can lead well. And that has enabled us to talk more openly with people about, how are you taking care of yourself? What do you do to refill? Those are topics that not every business owner was open to talking about before, and it's still not every business owner is today, but many more are today than they were before. And I'll just say that the pandemic made that easier for us.
Yeah, I agree with that. It brought a lot to the surface, and I think companies are still figuring out, what does remote work look like?
Yeah.
How do we work in teams? Like, I love having a remote business, and also there are times where I'm like, I am in my office 9 hours a day by myself.
Yeah.
There's just pros and cons, and in a world where you can develop any kind of work style, it is interesting to be in the position to design it yourself. And the challenge that I see, and therein sort of the question I'm going to lead you to, is like, how do we not just copy what we've seen? And how do we invent something truly original or fitting for our workplace if we are constantly just looking at what everyone else is doing? I mean, the world of big companies seems to have gone somewhat hybrid, but then pulled everyone back. The world of remote, like with various different orgs and particular kinds of organizations, seems to have gone full remote, but then they saw culture problems and they saw people leaving for less pay. Mm-hmm. It was just a nebulous space. But if we're the entrepreneur, we're also responsible for the culture. We're also responsible for the emotional integrity of everyone else.
Yeah.
How do you help leaders, or what do you think leaders need to be more aware of as they consider, the way they build their team and the way they keep their culture intact?
Yeah, I love that kind of question. And sometimes I fixate on words. It sounds like you appreciate certain expressions as well. You've kind of keyed in on some that I've used. One of the words you said, and I can't play it back exactly, but you were talking about original. Like, how do you do this in an original way? And I actually think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice if the objective is originality. If we're like, I have to be original. And so we're trying to be different from everyone. And I get that from a strategy standpoint, we got to differentiate. But we don't have to be original in comparison to others. We need to be true to our identity. And I think that's where we get messed up. I think businesses don't spend enough time getting clear on their shared identity, which to me is at the core of culture. We use culture a lot, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people, and it's hard to nail it down. But for me, and it starts with that flame conversation we were talking about, a purpose, a cause, something bigger than themselves. To me, that's part of the heart of this shared identity that we have in our unique business, right? We're unique, not in every way, but this is our shared identity, and purpose is part of it. And then the other part of it is those shared values, shared core values, not all values that we each hold as individuals on the team, but the shared values. We all hold these ones to be dear and true, right? We hire, lead, and fire to this set of values. So that purpose and those values end up being that shared identity. And that's the way we need to build our thing, whether it has to do with remote work, hybrid work, in-office work. The right answer for our business is always going to come back to our shared identity. What makes sense for us? Yeah.
Dude, I don't know if you have any book plans in the future or anything like that, but this line is a smash. The goal isn't to be original, it's to be authentic.
True to self, right? You just got to be true to self. But the problem is most of us as business owners, we know what authentic for us individually feels like.
Yeah.
And usually because of that culture or company and owner thing we talked about earlier, where they're kind of inextricably linked at the beginning.
That's right.
We don't fully realize that those, they have to be separate. The company identity needs to be completely aligned with the individual, with the founder identity for sure. But it is separate, and we got to get clear on what it is before we can create this authentic shared identity.
Yeah, I think a lot of our work ends up being around clarity and vision. And one of the things I notice as a trend is that a founder, an entrepreneur, will sit down and make a vision that's like fucking awesome for him.
Right.
It's like, it's great for him.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily, without work or without some awareness, also extend beyond clients, beyond the team, into the community and into the ecosystem. The reason our logo is a chess piece is that, and there's a puzzle piece sort of in the middle that's open. We believe that if you do the inner work, that big awareness piece, that really entangled identity and belief thing that gets all meshed up together, if you do the work on that, then you become the most powerful piece on the chessboard. You change your community, you change your family, you change your friends, you change your business. And that radiance is really interesting, because I think visions are often inherently self-serving, right? They're just like, this is what I want my life to be. I want to have the Ferrari, and I want to have the house, and I want to have the travel, and I want to build a family. But then your team is like, well, bro, like, what the hell do I get out of this? And, how's this help me? And I mean, I get it. Like, we have cool culture. Like, we get to have lunch every Friday, but what about my vision? And one of the things that I'd love to hear your opinion on is, I think that business owners would grow a lot faster and would grow a lot further if they created space in their vision for their team to also have amazing lives, and for their team to be rewarded and bear the fruits of their labor. What's your take on that? And how do you help people, if you do agree, how do you help people kind of embody those things?
Yeah. Well, I think your spidey sense was right that I would agree with that. At that $100 million software company, I actually created what we call a dream manager program. There's a book by that name, The Dream Manager. Highly recommend it. I had actually a software developer, of all people, read the book and say, I think this fits with our culture really well. I'd love for you to read it. I'm like, awesome. I'll check it out. So I read it, and I immediately knew we would have a dream manager at that company. Like, we are going to do this. And then I shared it with the CEO. I'm like, you got to read this. And he was throwing down, just like those scrappy, gritty founders do. It's like 6 books a quarter, right? 24 books a year. Like, that's how he was growing as fast as he could. And I'm like, you got to squeeze this one into your list. You have to read it. So I remember he went on a flight out to some business thing, and then he texted me. He's like, we're going to have a dream manager. I'm like, I know, right? We're going to have a dream manager. And the way that we did it is that we unlocked, we elevated the way that our people thought about their own lives. And then we invited them into the conversation about dreaming for our company. And that's why, just like you said, Aaron, when it's about the founder's Ferrari or the founder's bank account or whatever, those I'll call them, transactionally oriented goals, keep the conversation at a transactional level with our team members. They're contracting with us in a very transactional way. Yeah, and that's the way we've set up the game. But when we invite them to create new possibilities for what we could do together with this business around this cause, they see a bigger thing, and now they share ownership around that thing. And if we can get them thinking about that in their own lives, we unlock a level of excitement and drive and passion about what they want to create in their life by participating in the thing that they're co-creating in the business. It's really powerful. I don't know of another way to unlock more potential than to have people engage in this type of thinking collectively in the business and individually in their life.
Sounds eerily familiar to the last 3 years, where we've heard a lot about how culture actually directly leads metrics, data, like all of it, proven to better performance. It's not, I mean, there's some caveats that are different, but ultimately these are the same points, that a better culture gets more from people.
I mean, I will get in that line all day long to say, yep, I second that. Performance. I went to graduate school. I got a degree in organizational behavior. It sounds really technical, but it's all about how organizations are perfectly aligned to get the results they get, right? All organizations, by the way, anybody listening, congratulations. You built the perfect thing for the results you're getting today, right? It's like master of the obvious moment, right? It's deep, but it's shallow. You have the perfect thing right now to deliver the results you're getting today. Now, if you want something different, we all know this, but sometimes it helps to hear it in a different way. If you want something different, you have to organize those parts in a different way. And what I see happen all the time is we want performance, and so we sort of, I don't know, crack the whip on the machine and just hope that we get more out of it. But if we can engage people in problem solving, like smart people with creative ideas who are passionate about this shared cause that we've invited them to co-create with us, it changes the math entirely. And we have fully engaged people. You'll hear, great places to work in the Gallup organization, and anybody who ever extols the benefits of culture for performance. They'll always talk about how the best cultures create great performance, but we still have a hard time helping people understand that.
It does seem that way.
Yeah, it's hard. It's kind of hard to get, because it requires us to lead in a new way. The old way to get our business off the ground was scrappy, gritty, throw it on my back, will it forward, right? Like, and it's very individually focused at first. I don't know what to do. Go figure it out. I figured it out. Now, next problem. I figured it out. Bring somebody in to help me. But all along the way, I'm the one. I figure it out. I pull it forward. I make it happen. And then all of a sudden, we're supposed to say, oh, this thing I created through my blood, sweat, and tears, I'm going to open that up and invite other people into helping me create where we're going to go with this thing next together. It's totally like, it's unintuitive, right? It's counter what I had to do to get this thing off the ground.
Wow. Man, that quote is great. You built the perfect thing to get the results you're getting today. Yep. Hello.
We all did. We all did.
Okay. So I think there's also this question on the backside of like, what's the ROI? Now, my opinion is that culture is essentially your standards and your systems. Those two things create culture. Standards are like the people things, the emotional, communication-oriented elements of a business that are really important. We don't do this. We do this. We don't show up late. We do start on time, that kind of stuff. And then the systems really help keep the people problems out of the things that don't need to have people problems. But that might be process and procedure. That might be SOPs. That might be, the developments of software, automations, or whatever. But there's still a whole lot of like misrepresentation when it comes to investing in culture. There's still like a whole brand that is like, well, why culture? And I think part of that is the expectation that entrepreneurs have is, it's sort of like the Pygmalion effect. Like everyone is just like me. I'm just going to assume that people are wired like me because I work nonstop. I'm obsessive about what I do. I built this thing from the ground up. I just keep going, and I can push through all my pain. And other people are like, bro, I want to work 8 hours a day and go home and see my family. Where do you see the biggest opportunity? Maybe this is just based on your experience with a lot of people, for entrepreneurs to like truly be able to step out of their own little cocoon and say, hey, we do need to invest in culture, and it can't be me. Because I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to understand. It might not be them. Not every entrepreneur is wired to be a culture director.
Yeah. I think the best places to start to invest in culture is some of this intentional, I call it vision setting work. I'm not talking about vision boards. I'm talking about getting that clarity on purpose and values and mission goals. So all the unifying work in a business. And if you invite people into that conversation, and it's not one conversation, those are three different things, right? We got to get clear on our purpose, that flame or that guiding light or that cause, that impact, that meaning. Like we got to get clear around that. We got to get clear around our shared core beliefs, those values we talked about. And we got to get clear about the next summit. Maybe we've been through multiple summits, but now the next one is this. And over the next 3 years, we're going to go achieve that thing. So that's a specific what by when. But those three components are fairly low investment, high ROI, culture building, clarity elements. And the vast majority of businesses that I work with, even if they've done some work around those things, they kind of know, oh, we should get clear on our mission, and we need values. Like some of them have done that work, but they haven't done it in a way that really brings the team together where it's our thing. They've just kind of, the business owner's done it, him or herself, or they brought some people in, but we just check the box and then we never look at it again. And so I would do that foundational work, and then I would invest in systems, like you said, but specific ones around hiring and onboarding that create an environment where we're constantly teaching, living, talking about these values and the purpose in particular. And then we align all our effort to go achieve the mission that we've talked about together. So build the foundation before you put the house up. But the house or all these organizational pieces should come out of that core work that you did together. So you can hire outside help for this kind of stuff. I mean, we help with this kind of stuff. You can do it yourself. We did it ourselves, but you got to do it. And it's usually more a function of time than it is a dollar investment.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is, in my experience, though, the dollars that create the time. Right? If someone doesn't have the time to do it, put 20 grand into it, you'll find the time real fast.
Yeah.
You will figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. The financial, I'm with you. The financial element is like, no, we're really committed to doing this. So maybe it looks like this. Hey, we're all going to leave production. There's a financial investment. We're going to leave the production. I'm going to invest in an offsite location, a retreat environment for us to go get clear together. So there's, it's not necessarily paying a person or an organization like us, although you can get that help. Sometimes it's just we're investing in a location, and then the real cost may not show up in the bank account on the expense line, but of lowering production for this day to go offsite or these 2 days to go do some of this work. So you're right. It does show up as a financial commitment, but the actual work is like we're getting people together and we're being intentional.
Yeah, I can appreciate all the complexities that go into it. I have been there. I think every entrepreneur has been there. Like, we don't have the time right now. We don't have the money right now. We can't focus right now. And also, the benefit is so much bigger than I think metrics would suggest. And one of the things, I would love to hear your comment on this. One of the things that I find is really interesting, the higher you go as an entrepreneur, and I've gotten to work with some mega people, and it's so cool to just support them and see the way they think and decode it and try to see between the lines to help them. But what I've noticed is that the ability to put things aside and prioritize the unquantifiable, the unmetricable things start to raise in prioritization much faster. Like, this is a strange comment, but I want to hear your thoughts. If I talk to someone that is making 200 grand a year in their business, when they're investing in coaching, they have 1,000 questions. When I talk with someone that is earning 2 million a year in their business, it's a 15-minute conversation and they're signed on for coaching right away, right? Like they already get that, like, some of these things you can't draw down to a line item in an ROI, but it has an ROI. It just is a much more nebulous space. Like, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah. Let me draw this parallel. And again, it'll be completely in line with your experience, but hopefully it'll help other people. if you look at anybody who's excelled at anything in life, and we might put the label of success on them. If you were to drill down into how they've done that in their personal life, you would see the personal effectiveness or the personal success behaviors, right? You would see things like, here's what I do every morning, or here's my practice routine. If it's an athlete or a performer of some sort, like, here's the thing that I do. And they built rhythms, they built routines, they do things that most people don't do to get more successful results. Just like in a personal success or personal effectiveness world, there are similar types of behaviors and routines in an organization effectiveness or an organization success scenario. And in every case, they make time to get clear. They make time for certain routines, for certain organizational health routines that don't look like they have immediate ROI, but it's the practice of them that makes them successful over time. So you and I can both play this game where I have a podcast. It's called the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast. I was interviewing a guest the other day who I met 10 years ago, almost to the day. 10 years ago, his name is Bill Harney. He has a company called Keeping Current Matters. And when I met Bill, he was between 1 million and 1.5 million. Let's call it 1, 2, 1, 3. That's an often sticking point for people. They get that far and then they're kind of stuck. So over the last 10 years, and he said we might have been around 1.5 when I met. I didn't like refute his number on our podcast, but I remember it was like more like 1, 2, 1, 1.3. But at 1.5, he said, in the last 10 years, because of the culture investments specifically that we've made to be a great place to work, we've more than 10x. So maybe some of our listeners here would say it took 10 years to get 10x. Maybe that's not enough result for them. I don't know. But to go from 1.5 million to more than 15 million over that time, and to win national best place to work awards, top 4 small workplace in America. I mean, these are the types of people that we get to interact with all the time. And it's because they know what the personal daily discipline looks like in their own lives. And they know how to set up equivalent types of daily, weekly, monthly disciplines in their business that are around self-care for the company that don't always have immediately, financially measurable ROI points along the way. So that was long, but that's the way I would answer it.
That's a great answer. I actually really appreciate the thoroughness of that. That we're not looking at the things behind the scenes for a lot of this.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's 2 questions we'll kind of wrap up with. One, to you, what does it mean to get out of your own way?
To me, it means inviting somebody else in to help me see that I'm getting in my own way. And then it's having the commitment level. And if that means putting dollars behind it or more time to it, it means I have to change something that I'm doing. Sometimes we equate that in our minds to doing something else or doing something more. And sometimes it just means doing something less, eliminating something.
Amen. There's an interesting theme in a lot of our conversations from amazing people, and elimination is subtraction, removal, cutting, like delegating.
Focus, right. Yeah.
It's all in there. Okay. Then last question of the day. Running a business has its own challenges. We've talked through many of them today. But I think entrepreneurship deserves a little bit of like golden hour glimmer. Mm-hmm. So what is the most amazing thing about working with entrepreneurs, about helping them, about having your own business? Like let's go upside to the max of what's possible because of your business, because of a business that supports other, like you have a lifestyle that is supported by a business that also helps others get further, faster, farther in their business. It's a dream. Like, let's do a hard sell on why that's so
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible actually. Sometimes I pinch myself, especially when I already told you that I kind of accidentally went down this path. I didn't start out as a typical entrepreneur, but I could tell you now I'm certifiably unemployable. Like there's no way I could go back to working for someone else. The amount of freedom that I have to go be who I want to be, create what I want to create with the people that I want to create it in the way that we want to create it together. Like, there's just nothing else that compares to it. And so I feel like if there's any entrepreneur out there, a business owner who's starting to feel like I'm a prisoner to my own creation, there's good news. You got yourself into this mess. You can get yourself out of it. And unfortunately or fortunately, you're the only one that can. Nobody else can get you out of that. But you can. You created it. You could create something entirely new. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. I'm just humbled to even be around them and to rub shoulders with them and to be counted in that number, even a little bit, even accidental entrepreneur me. It's fantastic.
I feel there have been a couple times where I've been so nervous or I've gone through hard stuff and I'm like, can I just go get a job? Wouldn't this be a whole lot fucking easier? Like, and every time the answer is like, absolutely not, man. There's no way anybody would be brave enough to hire me, man. No way. Or that I'd last more than like a week before I'm like kicked out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't last.
If I'm not kicked out, I'd kick myself out. I would just, I'd have to get out of my own way and, and leave. Oh man, Brett, this is so helpful. I appreciate all of your insight. It is no doubt that you and I have very, very similar philosophies on how people can grow, but also why we pursue all this in the first place. So I can appreciate it. If we have some elite entrepreneurs that are tuned in and listening, and they're like, bro, I got to get in the room with BG and all of his cool friends and other entrepreneurs, where can they find you?
You can certainly find us at growwithelite.com. Putting entrepreneurs in the URL is just not a good idea ever. And like I said, we have an Elite Entrepreneurs podcast. We're actually launching another one called the 7-Figure Journey podcast right now. So you can find me on LinkedIn. There's a few places.
Amazing. Well, I recommend that you do. Check out what he's doing. Brett, if there's any way that we can ever be supportive of you, of your crew, we're all in, even if that just means you and I go get tacos and catch up. I'm a big fan of your work and a big fan of all you're doing.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a pleasure to be with you today. Keep doing great stuff.
I appreciate you, man.